Hi everyone, I want to thank you for attending this webcast today. This is Dan Goitein here with mLogica. We have an exciting webcast coming up today. Jeff is going to be presenting remote performance management. Jeff, you can just advance to the next slide, please. And so this is part of our Tips and Tricks web series of 2010. Make sure to look for our next scheduled event is October 19th. The topic will be Sybase IQ, Tips and Tricks. We had a lot of response from people looking for IQ, tips and tricks. And that will be presented by Paul Cornetta. Slide, please. So this is part of our web series that mLogica and ISUG will be hosting. We have our database tips and tricks. We'll be having some rep server tips coming up soon, our enterprise data integration. mLogica is a leading database consulting firm with specialization in Sybase technologies. Jeff's presenting this for us now. Jeff is the author of numerous books on both Sybase and Microsoft technologies, and our Vice President of Enterprise Data Management. We have a focus in information management, resource management, and business intelligence. I can always be contacted for any further interest in our products. This one I'll turn over to Jeff.
Hi, this is Jeff speaking. Good afternoon and welcome to our conference on remote performance management. What we're going to be talking about today is, well, in some ways it's remote performance management, in some ways it's just general performance management. Really it's about getting proactive about dealing with performance problems on your server. If you look at studies from Gartner Group and such, what they tell you is that mean time to resolution for performance issues is 80% identifying the problem and 20% solving the problem. Sometimes you can identify the problem quickly and sometimes you can't. So we'll spend some time talking about how to identify problems. But we'll also talk about how to identify the problems before people start coming over and kicking your desk and telling you that things are slow. So this slide we're talking about simply what we're looking at. As a DBA, as a developer, as somebody who's responsible for performance, you need to be able to find out what the server is doing, when it's doing it, and how it's doing it. So when somebody calls and says, hey, things are slow, you can take a look at it and see, well, what resources are currently being choked, what queries are running, who's doing it, what are the applications, fill in the blank. What that means, though, is that you're responding to the problem, not getting proactive and stopping the problem from happening. Best definition I ever heard for a great DBA or systems admin is that you never know the person is there because nothing ever goes wrong. Well, realistically, problems do happen and we're there to respond to them, but we want to not have to do that all that often. So the idea here is to get visibility and improve our visibility above and beyond, bring up a DB artisan and looking at the monitor when somebody calls with a problem, or even checking the monitor every 10 or 15 minutes or hour or daily, or beyond looking at the sysmons or beyond looking at the MDA tables. So let's just start digging into these things. There are a lot of products on the market that do this for you. Now, I have in the past not been a huge proponent of tools. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and for about that long, I've been writing my own tools to gather information, store them in tables, do statistical analysis against the information that I'm gathering. And what you find is that when you're doing that, you have a couple things going on. First, there's an extra little mini application that you're responsible for. Second, anytime the server changes and your premises change, you've got to change your application. If a system table changes, system table definitions change, column names change, new things get added, etc., you've got to deal with that. That can be a bit of a pain. About 3 or 4 years ago, I started getting involved with tools. The one that I like the best right now is Confio's Ignite. I'm going to be using that for my examples. It's not the only tool on the market, but it's one we like a lot. We've checked out a lot of these, and I'll be very happy to answer questions on this afterwards. Again, this is not a product presentation. This is a how to look at performance presentation, but we are using this product as a backdrop. Agenda, define performance intelligence. We'll talk about how to do analysis before things go wrong. The idea here is let's find out what's causing the slowdowns. We'll take a look at some weight type analysis, look at some raw stats, and we will talk a little bit at the end about the product that we're using. Performance intelligence itself, we're defining that here as a mechanism for collecting information about what the server's doing. That includes everything from what queries are running to who's running them to what the resources are doing to mapping SQL Server CPU against server CPU, looking at internal utilizations, I/O stats. One of the things that you find when you're debugging performance issues is that it looks like you're I/O bound. Well, you call the SAN people and say, hey, it looks like we're I/O bound. And about 110% of the time what they say is, the SAN's only running at about 3% of capacity. It's not us. Well, I did this at a financial organization, a couple of months ago. And I said, look, guys, you're I/O bound. And the SAN people said, don't think so. But when we rearrange things on the SAN and increase the number of LUNs, magically our throughput multiplied by almost as much a proportion as the number of LUNs that we added. So that to me is a real demonstration that we were I/O bound. Well, how do you demonstrate that you're I/O bound? One good way to do that is to take a look at this type of information, the information that you're collecting over time, and say, okay, look at this. I've got activity. My activity is spending 100% of its time just waiting for resources to become available. If those resources happen to be disk, well, guess what? You've demonstrated that you're I/O bound. We'll talk about a couple ways of looking at that. So the idea here is take a look at this over time, pick up the information, and be able to analyze the information that you bring in. So what is wait time analysis, and what is the performance intelligence, and how are we making use of that? Well, the short version is Sybase uses MDA tables. Let me rephrase that. Sybase makes available to you MDA tables that describe what's going on internally, and you have the ability to look at those MDA tables and bring information back. What a good tool does for you is take that information and basically give you the ability to analyze what it is and what it means as it refers to what you're building. So you need to be able to ask the question, why are the users waiting, and what can we do about it? It may be that the reason the users are waiting might be not a bad query. It might just be that it can't get enough memory, can't get enough cache, can't get enough disk resources, can't get enough whatever. If somebody calls and says things were really slow this morning and nobody else is complaining about it, what's that person's problem? Well, the person might have just had too much coffee and need to lay off the caffeine, or it might be that the person will spend a lot of time being blocked. So how do we identify these things? Well, we can identify these things by taking the time to look and see what the system is up to at a particular point in time. So performance intelligence takes the wait time. Now, the wait time that we're looking at here is the amount of elapsed time from the time you make the request until you get your response back. So if you send the request and the request is to calculate the value of pi out to 2,000 digits, well, most of what you're going to use there is CPU time. So what you'll end up with is wait time based on CPU. If what you end up doing is select asterisk from a table, well, most of your wait time, if the table is mostly on disk, will be I/O, and if it's not, it will be accessing memory plus whatever I/O is required to get the information off the disk, plus the network time that it takes to ship the information from the server out to wherever it is you happen to be receiving the information. So a lot of things going on, and what becomes useful to us is to identify where the stress points are. If a system is spending its time, say 80% of its time in I/O wait, well, guess what? You're I/O bound. Now, does that mean that I/O is slowing down your ability to access the system? Probably, but not definitely. If you're running at 1% of resources, well, guess what? You're going to spend some percentage of your time doing something. We do need to make sure that we're stressed before we start recommending that we make purchases. So performance intelligence, measure the wait time spent at each of the individual wait types. This is really practical because the monitoring is lightweight. Now, a lot of folks